Good afternoon, Mr. Almond. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here.
Sir, as you know, global economic outlook is an issue that is in everyone's heads today, especially among world leaders, politicians and economists. What's your view, what's the view of Deloitte on the prospects of the global economy and its growth?
Well, I think the continuing major issue that is holding up the global economy is the credit situation and the lack of credit. It's interesting that it's actually just how few big corporate failures there have been of big companies since the spike in 2008, 2009. And I think that reflects the fact that the central banks and other similar institutions have been pulling out all the stops to prop up the credit markets, which has enabled businesses to continue to operate. But I think there are signs of stress, particularly in Europe, of that. And availability of credit, again, is going to continue to be a core theme, particularly as many of the banks in Europe are just under massive pressure just to get smaller, shrink their balance sheets, which mean they are less able to advance new loans or to renew loans. So conditions are very tough. The impact for businesses is, unless you've got a very strong growth story and can demonstrate robust cash flows to your finances, then the cost of finance is definitely going to go up, and you're going to have to be razor sharp on controlling costs or grabbing every possible opportunity for additional revenues. But on the upside, I would say there are very good prospects, and certainly our surveys of chief financial officers in big companies show that they are actually quite confident in their own ability to survive and can seize opportunities for growth by taking over weaker competitors or filling gaps in the market that they leave. But to have the support of the banks in that quest, they do have to tick all the boxes. So they do have to have a strong balance sheet, compelling growth story, a great track record, and most of all, I'd say, a really great leadership team. So really tough conditions, really competitive conditions, but conditions in which the best competitors can not only survive, I think they could actually thrive and prosper.
Mr. Almond, you talked about the lack of credit, but what about the banks themselves? How many bank restructurings you've experienced so far?
Bank restructurings, well, of course, we know the experience here in Kazakhstan, where the government had to restructure a number of the banks. But I think if you look across the world, any big bank will have to do some form of restructuring in order to compete well in the very low growth markets that we're going to have for a while. The banks for many years have enjoyed, before the crisis, very high levels of return on capital employed, partly because the regulators seem to require them to have lower capital requirements than the capital markets require them to have. So the banks were able to invest in a whole range of new businesses, build a very big portfolio without worrying about return on capital. That's changed completely. So levels of capital are going up, the cost of capital is going up. So an example of a bank doing its form of restructuring is actually one of the real survivors from the crisis. A bank that's continued to prosper is HSBC, everybody knows. The chief executive there, Stuart Gulliver, when he took over, announced very stiff targets across the group for return on equity, for market standing, for potential for revenue growth. And any that don't meet those standards have to be sold off. Any business units are sold off or wound down. So a different form of restructuring, a self-imposed restructuring. And we see many of our international banking clients doing similar things, that if you don't take it on as a strategic priority, then I think it's unlikely you're going to continue to succeed in, as I say, very low growth markets for some years to come.
Mr. Almond, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your comments.
Appreciate it. Thank you.